I'll also mention that my wife told me last night that I was lisping. So if you notice me lisping, it's because I just had some teeth out and I've got like a substitute. They're 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 mine now. They're me now. Anyway, so we'll begin with some sitting meditation, settling into your posture, and you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. And beginning just with the general kind of check in with your state, your mind state, your heart state. I was just ranting a little bit, so maybe you'll feel the need to breathe into that, calm down a bit. Hope I didn't activate people too much. Fortunately, if anybody is listening to the recording, they didn't get to hear the rant, so they're okay. And just feeling the breath moving in the body. The simplest of human functions. And just being mindful of the breath, letting the attention rest with that, can have a calming impact without any other kind of effort. We don't have to try to calm ourselves down. Just pay attention to the breath. Not necessarily an instant fix, but can be very effective. Starting with just a broad awareness of the breath, how it's moving in the body, the sensations with the breath. And then refining the attention a bit, paying a closer attention to the sensations either at the nostrils, touch of air coming in and out, or the belly, the movement rising and falling. Either of these options gives us a very specific, potentially clear sensation to pay attention to. And that's really the idea, to be very specific about what we're paying attention to, the actual sensations, breathing in, breathing out. It's natural that the mind will wander when we try to pay attention to the breath. So we acknowledge that and then we come back. This is the simplest and most direct way to practice. So we want initially to calm the body and mind enough to gain some clarity about what we're feeling and what's appearing in the mind. But oftentimes, initially, when we begin to meditate, try to pay attention, there's too much energy, too much busyness to have much clarity. So the simple practice of coming back to the breath is the most useful and reliable approach. At some point, we may start to feel that we have enough space and clarity in the mind to see more clearly the thoughts and what they're about, or just their kind of themes. This can be quite revealing, a kind of meditative inventory. We also may become more able to tune into feelings, just being aware of mood and emotions without getting caught in a story or in resistance, just observing, just being present, just feeling. All of this still in the context of mindful breathing. So there is mindfulness of the breath, even as we begin to observe the mind and the feelings. This isn't to suggest that we start getting busy with our meditation, only to look at these things when we do sense that there's enough quiet and space in the mind to see clearly. And still, we will surely need to return to just the breath at times. It's so easy to spin out. as well as noticing the thoughts, feelings that pull us away from the breath. Also, pay attention to shifts in energy in terms of becoming sleepy as one can as things start to settle and you become more relaxed. Or conversely, becoming restless. Sometimes there's too much energy for sitting still. It feels constricting. We can breathe with that. We can also just do walking meditation. Just slowly walk back and forth, feeling the body moving. One way to strengthen concentration is to try to pay attention to more details in the breath. You can notice the beginning of each breath, then the inward flow of air, sensations, the beginning of the out breath and then the outward flow, a whole stream of sensations, not just one sensation. A single breath is actually many different things. But don't turn that into a struggle. Only go there if it feels natural, comfortable. It's fine to keep a more general awareness, just breathing. We're just in and out. Above all, I think meditation should be easy, easeful. If we are turning it into a efforting struggle, trying to accomplish something or make something happen, it's counterproductive, not useful. Better to just relax, realize that you're sitting here and that you're breathing, or that you are sitting here thinking. So I've been kind of going back and forth, working with my book, A Burning Desire, and then going off into different topics that sort of showed up. Not necessarily invited topics, topics that invite themselves. Oh, we finished up with the section called Higher Power of Mindfulness, and we're now I'm at the beginning of the Higher Power of Wisdom. And so just a little bit about the framing of all this. The large section of the book is characterized by sections that are kind of defining aspects of the Dharma as higher powers. So in the sense of, the 12-step idea of higher powers. So trying to see how these elements of the Dharma can replace a theistic approach to the 12 steps, and just, be able to say, I turn my will and my life over to the care of the Dharma rather than God. And so the higher power of wisdom, what that is about is what's called the three characteristics, or the three characteristics of existence in Buddhism. And those three characteristics are impermanence, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, and not self, or the lack of singular identities. And these three truths or characteristics are intertwined, and they have a relationship that sort of supports and explains each other in a way, and the sort of main point not the main point, but like the value of them, let's say, as subjects of contemplation, is that they help us to understand the reality that we live in from a kind of very high viewpoint, from sort of the 10,000 foot or 30,000 foot view. And in that way, they kind of function as core elements of refuge. When we say we take refuge in the Dharma, a significant part of that is remembering everything is impermanent. Things are not satisfactory. They're not going to bring answers to us. There's no self in here that's experiencing this. It's just a flow of conditioned elements. What is it that Lee Brasington calls them? The streams of dependently arising phenomena interacting, or something. And that's sort of who we are and what reality is. And indeed, that's true. All of that is true, I believe. I think it's a pretty, I think it's a fair statement. And, it's not enough for us to, understand life, to understand our existence. And it's certainly not something that we can just toss off. Well, everything's impermanent, so, they died, kind of thing. Like, no, that's just not, it's not helpful, it's not wise, and it's really not true in the sense that that's that captures the totality of some reality, because we also know that life is this really remarkable thing, that it happens at all. Truly one of the greatest mysteries, and which I understand why people made up God as a creator, because who could understand that at one time this planet was just a bunch of inert gases and rocks and ore and metals and things, and maybe somewhere liquid or whatever, and there was water eventually. How can we understand that somehow out of that lack of life, that non-life, came this thing we call life, that it became animated? It's so unlikely, when you think about like the reality of the universe, that just there was, we don't know really what has gone on. We've gotten pretty close to the beginning of this present universe, but the so-called Big Bang, something had to exist before that. And in any case, there weren't any people in that bang, and somehow through billions of years that like transformed into like, staring at each other on a screen that, humans invented. And so to write off human life as just something that's impermanent and not self and subject to suffering is to also really dismiss the incredible mystery and beauty and unlikelihood of existence, of existing at all. So on the one hand, we have to learn to let it go, because for each of us it's really fleeting. We aren't really important as individuals. But on the other hand, it's incredibly precious. Look at all the other beings that you see in the course of your day, whether it's spiders or ants or dogs or birds. None of them have the capacity to do what we do, And, whether our lives are better or not than theirs, I don't think, I don't know, maybe some of you would trade in for being a bird, but, human life is pretty damn special. It really is. And that's, of course, what makes what we do with it that much more tragic. That, here we're given this precious gift, and what we do with it. There was an article, I think it might have been on the front page of the New York Times recently, in the last week or two, about quantum computing. Computing that will use the laws of quantum physics. And, of course, the first thing was about how fast they'll be able to do things, And like, it was sort of like, there was no like reflective part of this article, like any questioning whether this would be a good thing or not to unleash on the human race, right? Because it would also make it impossible to encrypt stuff, or not impossible to encrypt, impossible to unencrypt things. You'd be able to encrypt things that nobody could ever break, and that's great, complete privacy, And I just thought, I think we're getting to a point where humans are going to actually question whether all of their scientific progress should be just adopted unthinkingly, or whether we should maybe have a some kind of a panel of of non-scientists who decide whether you can actually proceed with your research. Like, we've developed this great thing where you can split the atom. It's so amazing. Oh, that's great. Thanks. Now we can blow up the world. Good job. So, but I guess that's also part of the, miracle of our existence, that, so it's kind of, this is why there are morality tales and why people have invented heaven and hell, because, and good and evil, especially because nothing out there is inherently good or evil until we get our hands on it. And then we determine, right? And the Dharma, Buddhism, our premise is that that fundamentally human beings are good, that we are fundamentally loving, that we are fundamentally compassionate, that there is a kind of purity to our consciousness when it's not overrun with greed, hatred, and delusion. And that if we make an effort to, let's just say, purify our minds, it's sort of an, I don't want it to sound moralistic, but it's really just like clean up our minds, like sweep out the cobwebs and, get the dust out of the corners. That what you find is this bright, wise, caring consciousness. And, and if you've ever been on a meditation retreat where your mind got really quiet, you understand that idea, because when everything is stripped away, we're not just these neutral, bland beings. We're these bright, loving, sensitive, caring beings. And many of us, if not everyone here, has had some taste of that. Some have touched something of that, and that's part of why, if not a significant part of why you're here, I think, because you want that to be the thing that you live from. You want to be in touch with that part of yourself. You've touched it, you know it's there. And even if you haven't touched it a whole lot, I mean, it's there in us. We don't have to meditate to know it's there. But, definitely meditation and, reveals it very explicitly, very graphically. So, there's this hunger among us, I will say, us spiritual seekers, to keep this part of us awake, and as the kind of way that we engage the world, and to try to let go of the anger and the judgment and the greediness and the fear, and lead with love, and lead with openness and generosity. And I think when that's what you're guided by, and I can say, I feel like, as much as I didn't live up to it, even before I got sober, I wanted, that was my values. I was far from being able to live up to them, and I'm still not. I still don't want to claim to be, I'm certainly not perfectly living up to those values, but that was always in me. And frankly, it was the Vietnam War that brought that most alive for me. That it became really clear to me that I was opposed to people killing people. I don't know, it doesn't seem like a radical stance, because it seems to me there's, a bunch of religions that actually oppose that as well. So humans, so I guess it surprises me. I continue to be surprised by people who aren't guided by compassion and caring as their primary, primary principle. People who are guided by prejudice and ego, control, with the wish to control others, and greed. Yeah, the greed is really remarkable in our world, just shocking. Truly an addiction, just probably the most destructive. It's hard to distinguish between greed and hatred, the hatred that creates wars. It's hard to, and that murders people. It's hard to decide which is the most destructive force, because the greed winds up leading to the death. This is such a cheerful. Is this a Dharma talk? I don't know what this is, but I'm sure I'm just putting everybody in a great mood. I recommend watching a sitcom after this. That would be my guidance. Yeah, so I'm looking at the clock. Am I done yet? So let me talk about, come back to this topic of the higher power of wisdom. As we'll be, I'm going to go through them in the coming classes, the three characteristics. And I start with suffering, and it's interesting that, a lot of times when this is another one of those little shifts that happen in Dharma teaching. When I was introduced to these three characteristics, which in Pali are dukkha, which is the suffering or unsatisfactoriness, anicca, which is impermanence, or as Ajahn Chah said, it's uncertainty, and then not self. So, I'm sorry. So it's dukkha, anicca, anatta was how I was introduced to those. Suffering, impermanence, not self. But over the years, that got flipped to anicca, dukkha, anatta. So they lead with impermanence now. The people out there in the Dharma world. And I can't help but think that they're like, I don't know, it's kind of depressing to lead with suffering. Let's lead with impermanence. That's better. And impermanence is a little easier to grasp and to explain as well. It's very easy to explain. Dukkha, suffering is a little more challenging to talk about. But I'll say, like, the way that I start talking about this in the opening of this chapter is to say that there are three different ways that we can sort of utilize, think about, approach these three characteristics. We can experience them in meditation, and certainly when it comes to impermanence, it's, as you're breathing in, you're breathing out, that's impermanence right there. Your breath is constantly changing. Unsatisfactoriness, when you watch your mind for a little while, pretty quickly you see that, there's this kind of grasping, and that you can't sort of satisfy yourself, that there is no sort of end answer. And as well, although it's certainly not something easy to necessarily see, we could say that it's easy to not see a self. That is to say, if you're meditating and you're trying to figure out what's me, you're going to kind of go around in circles, and you're going to try to point to things, but anything that you point to, you're going to realize is impermanent. So it's not solid. So how does that make it? How can it be you if it's just something that's in constant flow? So there's this approach that we can take that's meditative. It's just like sitting with these truths and observing them unfolding, and letting them sort of rest in the heart, and so that really we take them in. To me, what they do, for instance, I think all three of them do this. So I'll say it, that I think they help us to accept reality, particularly when reality is difficult. When we realize, oh, well, everything, the car broke down. Oh, everything is impermanent, Oh, and that's unsatisfactory. And the car is just made up of different parts. There isn't like they can take out the engine and put in a different engine, and is it still the same car? It's not. There's no like thing there that's car. So I feel like these things help us to get through our day, just that reality. But they also help us to be at peace just in meditation, to sit and see, oh, all this stuff that's coming, that it's impermanent, and it's not gonna, I can't think my way into like everything being okay. I can't fix anything just sitting here meditating, and there's no self that I have to protect or build up. I can just let go of that. So there's a lot of freedom that comes from that. So there's directly in meditation to understand dukkha, anicca, anatta. Then there's through the contemplation, which is more what I was describing with the car. It's like thinking through the reality of these things. We reflect on them. And that's a way that we can, again, sort of take them in so that they become our way of seeing the world. They aren't just ideas. They are the lens through which we see our experience. And then the third way to understand them or to work with them is in significant life moments, to remind ourselves, oh, right, that, everything is impermanent. I mean, impermanence is the one that's easiest to fall back on. But like you could have a big moment like, of success or failure in your professional life, say, and seeing how the feeling that arises in either of those is that, oh, self, I am successful, and seeing that, wow, that's creating this sort of inflated experience of just, this is just happening, it's not to an I. And then it's more obvious probably and more helpful, particularly in the moments of failure, when we can go, oh, I'm taking this on as a failure of me, but, there isn't really somebody here this is happening to. This is just the flow of a life. And there are, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral things happening in this life all the time. So there's the classic teaching on the worldly winds that talks about success and failure, joy and sorrow, and these 8 different things that happen, fame and ill repute. And it just says, like, if there's one, there has to be the other, and so if there's one, if they can't live without each other, then neither of them represents who you are. I'm a failure is just can only be seen in context of in contrast to success. And if we honestly look at our lives, we see that our lives are made up of successes and failures. It's one way of characterizing them, that and nobody succeeds. Nobody succeeds or fails at everything. So, this is again how we view these as refuges, things that we go to when the mind is getting confused and caught up in the chaos and the agitation of daily life and the challenges of the world and the challenges of our inner world. To remember that these are the three things that are there in every moment of experience. So that's more than enough, I think, for my speaking this evening. I wanted to mention, and Angela just let me know about this. I had not noticed that Ajahn Sumedho, really, who is kind of at this point, the patriarch of Western Theravadan Buddhism and somewhat of Thai Buddhism, even though he's American. In any case, he is coming to Abhayagiri Monastery. I'm going to put it, I just got the link. He's coming to Abhayagiri Monastery in June and going to give some public talks. That's up near Ukiah. And it's worth it to take a day trip up there. Ideally, if you can get there for the 11 o'clock meal and take something, just some food as an offering. Lots of people bring food, so there's tons of food. You don't have to think like, oh, I have to bring something for 30 people or whatever. But you bring a little dish and offer that. Then you get to see, visiting the monastery, you get to see the life of the monks, which is really revealing. I had all kinds of, ideas about what a monastery was like, and going to Abhayagiri pretty much broke up most of those. It's just a bunch of people living together in a very structured and, somewhat ritualistic way. In any case, if you can make it there, I highly recommend being there and being in the presence of Sumedho and the other monastics who will be there. So just if anybody wanted to chime in tonight, I can hang out for a little while. Typically, officially, this is just for an hour. So if anybody needs to leave at the top of the hour, you will not be judged. So, yeah. Anybody want to say anything? Well. People are getting shyer by the moment. Well, okay. I see Mike has got his hand up. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Kev, I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic, and you started the meeting in sort of a downward trend, and
then fell off the edge. Yeah.
No, that's not where I was going. I so much enjoy hearing you talk and putting the AA principles in this context. I just think it's the greatest thing. I wish I could attend these meetings more often, and I haven't attended in several weeks, but I enjoy the hell out of them, and I think you're doing a great job, and I really appreciate it. And I enjoy your writings as well. It's terrific. Please keep up the good work. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Mike. Very kind. Ah. So, Memorial Day weekend, the weekend when they used to open the swimming pools where I'm from, and that was an exciting moment in the year. School would still be in, but the swimming pool would be open, and it was actually celebrated on May 31st until they made all the holidays be Monday. But of course, I never paid attention to the actual so-called meaning or the name of the holiday. I just paid attention to the swimming pools. But it is supposed to be a time of remembering. And I believe it's supposed to be a time of remembering the deaths of American soldiers. And I would sort of suggest that maybe this weekend, instead of just remembering American soldiers, we remember other Americans as well. 1 million of us have died in the last 2 years from COVID. It's pretty remarkable. Anyway, I thought, Mike, I would end on a down note since no, I'm not going to do that. I do hope that people find some joy. You know that I am determined to find joy in my life, and I do find joy. Last night, for a basketball fan, it was a truly almost blissful experience. And the only unfortunate part is that there's other teams. my wife, actually, whenever we're watching the end of a sporting event and we're watching somebody losing, she always starts to feel sorry for the team that loses. And I'm like, no. But yeah, and boy, talk about impermanence, because that when you follow sports and you're really into a team, if they win a championship, the problem is that the next day it's over, really. And at the beginning of the next season, it's officially, and they have to do it again, all over. It never stops. It is totally impermanent. What you want is like, okay, we won, we're the best forever. It's over. Nobody else can play basketball now anymore. That's the rule, because we're the best. So, it's hard to be a Buddhist because we see reality too clearly, and you realize it's unsatisfactory. Even being the champion is unsatisfactory. Because you're not. It's not self. It's not who you actually are. It's all only temporary. So I do enjoy your time. I'll be back on Tuesday morning, and you might, if you're thinking of someone to memorialize. I don't know if people know that Walt Opie's mother-in-law passed away this week. So if anybody's into loving kindness prayers for the deceased, you can send prayers for her. I actually don't know what her name is, but blessings to Walt and his family. So I hope everybody stays well, stays safe, wears a mask when they go into crowded public places. Peace.